Previously, in one of my videos, I said that I would like to try my hand at writing a female protagonist at least once to sort of challenge myself and maybe use that experience for future stories, for writing side characters. And definitely the most challenging part is to make sure that the female protagonist is distinctly female compared to her male counterparts in the same setting. Fortunately, considering what I'm trying to achieve in writing stories, I don't have to care as much about my, let's say, lack of ability to portray a woman from our world simply by the virtue of, well, me being a man, since the core of my belief when creating a story is that it's happening in a completely different world with different rules and different ways the societies and cultures develop. So even though that obviously in our world women and men have different ways of thinking, different ideas, different solutions and approach itself to problems and so on and so forth. I don't have to try and copy this exact difference. I just have to make sure that the men and the women in my stories are truly different from each other, but they don't need to and don't have to and should not adhere to the differences in these two from our world that I do live in as the author. The difference definitely has to be in place because otherwise I would just end up with a bunch of dude bros with different body types. The outside might be different, but the inside would be exactly the same unless I actually focus on creating those differences that make sense within the setting itself. It should have been obvious to me from the moment I wanted to try and actually make a completely different universe for my stories. Yet, without doing these videos and articulating the difference between having the personalities from our world transplanted onto characters from a different one and men and women in a different world that developed with different rules and constraints and ideologies and social norms that resulted in them having completely different set of distinctive traits that separate them from each other and allow them to be individual characters within the same setting. Example would be that if in our world it's obvious that in the old era men went to war and women stayed behind. If in my world both genders can achieve similar results in terms of physical abilities, it would make way less sense to adhere to this historical rule from our world with only a few exceptions. But on the other hand, motherhood still exists, and I can't really avoid that as long as I'm using humans as the characters that I'm describing, unless I make them pop out from the ground or some cocoons. So this definitely needs to be taken care of when I'm creating the story, at least to an extent, without me going overboard, desperately trying to come up with explanations that make at least some sense. So it's definitely one thing that I'll have to be very careful about because there absolutely needs to be, in my eyes, in my opinions, at least some differences if that story is supposed to be something that I would like to read, and said differences can't be just inversions of the norms of our own world because that would just serve to irritate me. Some stories try to do that, and some of the cliches used in those just make me stop. Example of these inversions would be men don't like to fight, women do, and that's all. That's just I don't know, a bit sad. Maybe instead men could be more interested in building safe houses while women would be defending them, or that both would be interested and willing to go on these adventures, explore beyond the known, but one of them would do it for, let's say, financial stability, and the spirit of adventure would be less important factor in their motivation, while the main driving force behind the others' willingness to go out there would be exactly that, the spirit of exploration, while also not forgetting the possibility to secure their future. As I've said, births are a thing, can't really do much about that. As long as we are speaking about humans, I would like to attempt to create some different races, and those can have some different means of continuing their generations, but for humans there needs to be a way to handle this with care without making it sound just like a career woman ready to settle down when she's over this adventure stuff, because that would definitely make the story worse in my own eyes as the only intended reader. Summary would be: don't just invert our standards, invent new ones, and the most important thing is to be subtle about it, introduce it gradually, little by little, not just like a hammer into the face. And well, intro way too long, rapid arrows, since they finished their great frozen adventure, and this time they are challenged by another club for a snow battle, 5 against 5, using just snowballs and briefcases as shields. After the initial attack against the fort fails, it's time for some actual tactics involving a deceptive retreat followed by a blitzkrieg counterattack, during which Speedy falls victim to a stray snowball bullet, according to his words, leading to his complete blindness, and that death will only serve as mercy, which follows by Yindra telling him to clear his eyes and stop crying, man up and fight. And then the rapid arrows finally manage to defeat the defenders, chase them out of their fort, and win this winter war, with ironically Speedy boasting that it's all about courage and not being afraid of some hits and pain. Next time a skating rink is open and the rapid arrows are heading there, ready to spend the entire afternoon grinding on the ice, and Redcap has an idea that they could practice for a performance, show some figures, have fun in front of the audience, and maybe even earn some pocket money for more club adventures. And so they decide to start practicing, and it's just Speedy who seems to have both legs left-legged, and the ice is quite often best friends with his backside. But nevertheless, it seems that the performance is ready, and Speedy even declares whoever messes it up will clean the floor of the club room for 7 weeks straight. They gather quite the audience, the form seems great, the 5 club members switch from different postures in a 5-man train, the ice seems to be their playground, and yet, who would have guessed, during one of the poses, Speedy feels the impending doom, aware that a disaster is coming, and for sure that is exactly what happens. He performs a short Saint Vitus dance and falls chin first into the ice, questioning how many Sundays he said that the cleaning duty will last for whoever messes up the performance. The boys find out that the caretaker of one of their homes is ill and thus can't clean up the snow in front of the building, so they offer their services. The usual banter ensues, and amidst that, Indra is keen on showing everyone how it's done properly, so he runs with all his might with the snow shovel, only to be stopped by the curb and planting himself face first into a huge pile of snow, screaming for rescue from the white grave, fearing the death by suffocation or any other similar way of ending his journey amongst the living, to the great amusement of Speedy and Redcap, who this whole demonstration was initially for. Redcap saying that he flew into the snow pile like it was plum jam, Yindra still screaming, this time for firefighters to help him, and Speedy offering him that they'll use a tractor to pull him out. Unfortunately, their laughter did not last long because from a nearby roof a huge pile of snow slides off and partially buries Speedy and Redcap underneath it. This time it's them shouting that they've been ambushed from behind by bandits, and Indra laughs at them, offering them help with a small tractor or to scrape off the little plum jam, ending it with who's laughing now. This is it for today. Extremely long intro. I'll try to keep it shorter in the next one, but whenever I attempt to make my incoherent thoughts into at least semi-coherent words and sentences, time just seems to fly right by. So we'll see in the next one.